We were at resolutions. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand here as a result of the good and kind people of the Elizabeth constituency. And I stand here as a proud, patriotic Bahamian, but I also stand here as a student of history. And I would like to start my contribution this afternoon with a brief reminder of an important event that changed the world. We are now a number of years after June the 6th, 1944, which all listeners would recognize was D-Day, when the Allied forces attacked at Normandy, stormed the beaches of Normandy. But there's a side history to that story that a lot of people do not know. And that is that the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, was at odds with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Churchill, and he threatened to resign in March of 1944 because he wanted to change the strategy. Across the aisle, on the German side, there was great consternation because the technocrat, Rommel, thought that the Germans should fortify at Normandy. And the leader had a different idea. History will show, Mr. Speaker, that in this instance, Eisenhower was correct and Churchill was wrong. Rommel was correct and Hitler was wrong. Mr. Speaker, I start with reference to Ephesians 4:15, where it says, when you're talking about how to share a difficult truth, the passage says, but speaking the truth should be in love, that it may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, like Christ. And so, Mr. Speaker, my comments today, which may not be well received by all, are offered in love. In 1966, Sir Randall Fox, in this place, got up and suggested that the time had come for the people of the Bahamas to become an independent nation. 1966. That idea did not come to fruition until a group of opposition and government officials flew to London in December of 1972, where the Constitution of the Bahamas was crafted and drafted. There were fundamental rights and freedoms that were put into that document. Article 19, the protection from arbitrary arrest and detention. Articles 22, 23, the protection of freedom of conscience, the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. It was always anticipated, Mr. Speaker, that there could be a possibility that an emergency could arise. And that is why Article 29, I believe, was written. And it describes the process in a period of war or emergency when a number of the democratic processes and freedoms could be waived. Mr. Speaker, I believe that just like D-Day in World War II, that the change in the reality of the world due to COVID is a similar event. And yet, no less than the Secretary General of the United Nations speaks on the need for us not to neglect human rights. And he says, and I quote, "This is not a time to neglect human rights. It is a time when, more than ever, human rights are needed to navigate the crisis in a way that will allow us as soon as possible to focus again on achieving equitable, sustainable development and sustaining peace. There were three major items that the Secretary General of the United Nations spoke as it relates to human rights and COVID-19. And that is the right to life and the duty to protect life, the right to health and the access to same, and the central challenge to freedom of movement. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am reminded that just a short month ago, in this place, we spoke about the status of COVID-19 in the world and in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. When I spoke during the budget debate on or around June the 10th, 2020, there were some 416,000 people that had died from COVID-19. And at that time, there were 7.4 million people confirmed to have infections. As of this morning, the world has confirmed some 12 million COVID-19 infections, and we have had more than 547,000 souls that have been lost. The countries with the greatest burden from COVID-19 include the United States, Brazil, India, Russia, Peru, Chile, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Mexico, 5 of the above countries being countries in the Americas. And these countries account for some 7.9 million of the confirmed cases, or 2/3. We spoke before about the importance of testing as a strategy in the fight against COVID. To date, the Bahamas has tested some 2,467 persons for COVID, or they've done 2,467 tests. That equates to a total of 6,272 tests per million. What does that number mean? If we look around the world, and there are some 215 jurisdictions, countries, conveyances, etc., the average number of tests for those 215 countries, etc., is 110,000 tests per million. 110,000 tests per million. The Bahamas today has done 6,272 tests per million. In comparison, the Cayman Islands have done 383,000 tests per million. Bermuda, 126,000 tests per million. Barbados, 29,000 tests per million. The United States, 117,000 tests per million. The greatest cut of all is Turks and Caicos. In the early part of this pandemic, they could not do their own RT-PCR testing, and they would send their tests to the Bahamas. As of today, the Turks and Caicos are testing at a rate of 21,252 tests per million. The Bahamas, 6,272 tests per million. When I spoke a month ago, we were at 115. We're now down to 120 plus in terms of the rate of testing. Now, the WHO has made it very clear that diagnostic testing for COVID-19 is critical to tracking the virus, to understanding the epidemiology, to informing case management, and to suppressing transmission. As of June 16th, 2020, the Centers for Disease Control in the United States updated their recommendations for testing. They describe the 3 different methods of testing: antigen testing, which is just now coming on board and will be available perhaps at the later part of this month; antibody testing, which is not terribly effective for diagnosing people with COVID-19; and molecular testing, the RT-PCR or swab tests. The indications for testing have been expanded, and they include both diagnosis and surveillance. Because, according to the British medical journal, Thorax, in an article by Ing, Cox, and Green, as many as 80% of persons infected with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. As many as 80%. And so a strategy to test people on the basis of symptoms is going to miss persons with COVID-19. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have an intimate relationship with the country to our north that is currently the epicenter of COVID-19 in the world. I speak of the United States of America, which currently accounts for some 25% of all confirmed cases of COVID-19. In that country, they do not have the ability to do contact tracing in much of the southern part of the United States. Just yesterday, the President of the United States elected to withdraw from the World Health Organization. And this decision will have huge implications for health, safety, and security, not just of the United States, but of the entire world, because of the impacts on our response to pandemics, building capacity, and vaccine development. And so today we find ourselves looking at our biggest and closest trading partner, our greatest ally, our closest friend. But we realize that they are also our greatest risk. Mr. Speaker, the United States has done quite a bit in changing its ability to test. As a matter of fact, they have trebled the number of tests that they have done from April to now. They've gone up 3 times. And yet, they are still not able to say that this pandemic is controlled. And there are serious challenges in 27 of the states of the United States that have an increasing number of cases, albeit with a decreasing level of mortality. So case numbers are surging. The percentage of persons testing positive is also increasing. So this is not just a function of more testing. This is a function of the pandemic not being under control. Our greatest trading partner, our greatest ally, our closest friend is also our biggest risk. And so, Mr. Speaker, as we look at the decisions that we make, being mindful of the story of Eisenhower and Churchill, sometimes we are going to disagree. That doesn't mean that we disrespect each other. That doesn't mean that we don't love each other. But sometimes, as we look at a problem, we all need to be honest, frank, and sincere, because this has implications for the survival of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And every single one of us, whether we talk in Seabreeze, South Beach, East Grand Bahama, Kalani, Carmichael, or any other, represents a number of people. We cannot abdicate that responsibility to speak honestly about how we feel. And so while we should seek first to understand and then to be understood, we should also speak about a different approach to this problem. One of the things that we have decided to do is to close the beaches. And the Texas Medical Association published, and I will table this when I'm done, a table of risks going from least to most. The lowest risk being opening the mail or getting restaurant takeout, to the highest risk being going to a bar. Mr. Speaker, going to the beach would be listed as moderate, low to moderate risk, or moderate risk, with a number of things that we do in the Bahamas, like working a week in an office building, swimming in a public pool, visiting elderly relatives or a friend at their home, eating in a restaurant, traveling by plane, playing basketball, or working out in a gym. All of these things are allowed a higher risk than going to the beach, provided that the appropriate social distancing and mask wearing when people are not in the water is maintained. So the first emergency proclamation was issued on March the 17th, and it was then extended. And at that time, the world was staring down the gun of an unknown adversary. We, all of us, I seconded the original motion. We collectively agreed to suspend the fundamental rights of persons under Article 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And we concentrated much of the decision-making in the hands of the competent authority. We mounted a response, and we have weathered admirably the first wave of the assault. The Bahamians got used to lockdowns, to curfews, to masks, to lines, and to social distancing. Shortly after March, we witnessed the addition of case after case after case, and then we plateaued at 104 cases, and it seemed as if the problem was beaten. As we have heard from the honorable member from Kalani, that was not to be the case. But in that process, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we surrendered the participation of many of the voices of the people as we did appropriately respond to an emergency. And now we have to decide, where do we go from here? Do we continue with the emergency orders? And if we do, for how long? Do we do it for a week, for a month, for 2 months? Or do we continue it indefinitely? And this is where perhaps the differences of opinions should be heard. I don't believe there's a right answer, Mr. Speaker, but I believe that all of the answers given by all of the members should be heard. We also need to decide if we're willing to expect as we maintain the emergency orders. The United Nations suggested that domestic violence was expected to increase by some 20% during lockdowns. We collectively have to look critically at our biggest ally, trading partner, source of income, and decide how are we going to deal with visitors from the United States. When we decided to put a travel restriction on China, there were less than 50,000 cases in China. The United States now has 3 million confirmed cases and some 50,000 cases a day, and increasing. I am not standing here, Mr. Speaker, to say that we should ban travelers from the United States. What I am saying is that we should make every effort to ensure that every single visitor, when they come here, has a negative COVID test, and that we are doing rigorous, meticulous checks on everybody who enters this country. So many of us hope and pray that the worst is behind us. I don't believe that it is. I believe that the presentation by the honorable member for Kalani suggests that there's more to come. But as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, we should do so together as a group of legislators duly elected by the people of this country to make decisions on their behalf. Let us do this as a team. Let us work together, opposition and government, to get the best for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I suspect that there will be a number of persons that have great difficulty with a position that suggests that we shouldn't all just walk lockstep together. But in this place, in the people's place, it is so important that we represent the people who we are privileged to serve. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of Exuma, Exuma Keys, and Ragged Island. I speak on their behalf, gratefully, and today I will be exceedingly brief because I am confident that the Bahamian people are getting tired. And secondly, the leader of the opposition has effectively laid our case. Let me say from the outset, though, that I do have a few concerns. My concern is that the extension of this emergency order will bring some complications that we have not heard the government side address. In my view, the member for Kalani has not laid the case. Despite the bravado, I am not convinced. I am also shocked, as the leader pointed out, that we have arrived at a place where those making these critical national decisions do not have the presence of mind to simply give notice of a resolution in sufficient time on something they consider to be so critical an emergency order as we found in this scenario. But it speaks to how this has been handled all along. On October 28th of June, the Competent Authority said that we had stopped community spread of COVID-19. Then, on Monday, announced that an emergency extension was requested or required. You say you need an emergency order because you are concerned about the virus and the surge in Florida, and then you open the borders to the US amidst the surge. Yet, I believe our borders are closed to Brazil at last report because of their surge. What I am saying is there is a dizzying inconsistency, and the public is now confused. Mr. Speaker, the Competent Authority oftentimes feel not the need to have to explain many of these decisions. But I would emphasize that the requirement of the Constitution for these orders is that decisions are justifiable and they are justified. So then we invite tourists to come, and then we tell them you have to be in by 10 and you can't go to the beach. So there are inconsistencies that we must manage. Lest we take charge of this process, we risk our national brand, and you risk losing even further the confidence of the people of the Bahamas. As I've said, the Bahamian people are tired. We demand consistent clear, sober, and accountable communication. Currently, I'm advised that there are no hospitalized COVID-19 cases. Prior to today, there were 4 persons who were reported to still be recovering. There's been no deaths in months. Prior to today's announcement, which I would add came after the request for an extension, there's not been any new cases in weeks, since June 14th, to be exact. We do not know if the 2 cases announced today are Bahamians, or whether they have a history of travel, or whether these cases are imported. So I question then, what was the emergency that was contemplated? There is no need for the Prime Minister to hang on to the powers of the competent authority that he so covets. And the leader of the opposition has presented alternatives. Further, I am not satisfied that the intent of the Constitution is to allow the Governor General and Parliament to impose state of emergency after state of emergency and govern by fiat indefinitely. It seemed to fly in the face of democracy. Since we have stopped community spread of the disease, as the competent authority has claimed, we should legislate social distancing, hygiene, and other safety measures through the Public Health Act or other legislative amendments. I don't know that there is a legal way to impose a curfew without a state of emergency. Therefore, in this scenario, there would be no curfew. But again, there is no point to a curfew if there is no emergency. Again, the government has not made the case. Even if we were in an emergency, what sense does the curfew really make? It was 9 p.m., 8 p.m., then it was 9 p.m., and now it's 10 p.m. Seems arbitrary to me. What does arbitrarily adding an hour here and there, what does it do? How does it save lives and protect people when people around others all day, 8 hours a day, working a full week? The former Minister of Health has promised to lay some statistics on this matter. Then you carry out a threat in your national address, and you threaten to close the beaches, and then you carry out that threat, in my view, without justification, as if we're in elementary school. I would remind the competent authority that the country's independence belongs to the people of the Bahamas and not to him alone. It is the reason we have our Constitution. To threaten people, to take away their ability to enjoy their own country is shameful. To do so without empirical grounding is contemptuous. And I'm saddened that we have come to this. We were not elected to come here to surrender our power and freedoms to one man. And I do not understand what we're doing anymore. The public is completely confused. And I wonder sometimes whether the government side understands themselves. Mr. Speaker, people are wary of the haphazard management of the state of emergency. And the longer it persists, the angrier people become. The longer it draws out, the more people are it is becoming more clear to me that the longer it draws out, people are concluding that this is about control and not necessarily about managing COVID-19. When you have no choice but to return to the government of the people in the coming months. I hope that what results when the people are in control does not shock you too badly. But know that whatever may come, you've certainly earned it. But whilst the opposition will have its say, the government, you certainly will ultimately have your way. We get that. But it's incumbent upon us to put our specific concerns. And I have 3, maybe 4, and then I conclude. Number 1, lack of capacity. We've opened the borders to tourists, and despite the need for COVID-19 negative tests, we all know that the risk of infected people coming to our shores is still relatively high. We know our borders are porous, especially via boat. Obviously, there can be infected persons who arrive, and there can be a new surge. And the question, therefore, that needs to be answered: do we have adequate facilities to deal with a real outbreak? Do we have capacity? What has been done while the emergency orders were in effect and the borders closed to build this capacity for a serious surge? Those are questions that I don't have answers to today, because in my view, you have not laid the case. My second concern relates to the Family Islands. With visitors being able to come to the Family Islands and absolutely very little capacity, if any, in some of our islands, I wonder if we have contemplated what's ahead of us. Do we have enough medical pods to accommodate those who may be sick and need to be airlifted? Do we have enough PPEs? Do we have sufficient isolation rooms? Do we have quarantine facilities? Do we have test kits? We need to be sure that there is sufficient capacity in place in this regard. We also do not have adequate testing capacity in the Family Islands, or perhaps anywhere else in the Bahamas, in my opinion. We've heard the former Minister of Health, and so far as testing goes, I am disturbed by the slow pace of testing that continues. Having observed what many other countries are doing, we question the strategy on testing. In my mind, supported by science and international best practice, it is only aggressive testing that will see us able to gauge how successfully we will ultimately combat this pandemic. As it stands, there could be many asymptomatic carriers moving around from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. And although there is the rationale that says, given our comorbidities, we would have seen more infections, but we don't know how many asymptomatic carriers are out there, do we? And we've heard the statistics today. Thirdly, legislative transition. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 will be with us for a while, it appears. There is still no vaccine. We also need to focus on what the post-COVID environment looks like, either through actions in the court, which I foreshadow, or perhaps when reality sets in, you will realize that we cannot live in a state of emergency indefinitely. We have to look at a world where people have their freedoms, but they can still protect themselves. And I don't see a solidly structured plan for this. We have been in a state of emergency and lockdown now for more than 3 months. But we have not seen any new bills laid to address the issues that will still be with us post-emergency order, unless it is your view that we will indefinitely be under the state of the emergency order. But there seems to be very little preparation for it. The current state of play does not allow restaurants to get to critical mass, especially given that they accommodate less customers inside due to social distancing. They have overhead. They must meet their fixed costs. And therefore, I make the argument that an 8 p.m. closure time is impractical, and I ask the government to revisit this. I am concerned that even in the tourism industry, we are not effectively managing the relationships with stakeholders. And I bring to your attention today that airlines up to yesterday are becoming increasingly agitated that they are having to return passengers who are denied entry due to lapses in the process. Specifically, whilst the health visa form on Bahamas.com gives options as to the type of test taken or to be taken, it appears that immigration officials only accept the PCR testing, which I believe is the standard. And therefore, people are being returned on flights they arrive on. They're blaming the airline. They're blaming the Ministry of Tourism, and it's impacting our brand. If we are going to do this, we must ensure the management and communication with all of the stakeholders, external and internal. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I put to the people of Exuma and Ragged Island and Bahamians across the Bahamas a word of warning. I would urge that you continue to practice the protocol. You continue to practice social distancing, and you continue to wear your mask. I've seen far too many people in several family islands in particular not wearing masks. I don't like wearing them either, but I do because it's the law and because science says it protects me. And I encourage Bahamians everywhere to follow the health protocols, follow the orders so long as they're in place. I know some of them are, in fact, uncomfortable to comply, but they are the orders as it stands. Mr. Speaker, the government has not put the case as to why an extension of the emergency order is required. We continue to drift from extension to a new emergency order. And if we're not careful, more extensions, because we have not prepared the legislative framework for a post-emergency order environment. And I fear that we are drifting into a dangerous place. And I would like the record to reflect that I am concerned about this. On behalf of the people of Exuma and Ragged Island, I'm always grateful to represent them. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, just before we proceed, I would like to announce the composition of the select of the Select Committee for, I notice a number of members are not in at this time, but I nevertheless would announce it, and they should be notified. The Select Committee to investigate all matters relative to natural resources of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas will compose the following members. The member for Centerville, Reese Chipman. The member for Marathon, Romal Ferreira. The member for Golden Gates, Michael Folks. The member for Fox Hill, Chanel Ferguson. The member for St. Barnabas, Shannon Dawn Cartwright. The member for Golden Isles, Vaughn Miller. And the member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andres, Picewell Falls. Mr. Clark, you have that? Pardon? As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown on a point of order.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify or clear up one or two issues that the good member from Exuma and Ragged Island stated. First of all, he stated that there were a number of countries that were banned, that the citizens from their countries banned for coming into the country. There are none. When you fill out a form, when you fill out the form and you put the country from which you are originating, there is a risk coefficient that is assigned to that country. And when you fill out the form at travel.gov.bs, you get a green, a yellow, or a red. And obviously, there are a number of countries that we assign a risk number to. And as your risk number increases, you go from a green to a yellow to a red. You also mentioned that we seem to accept rapid antigen tests or antibody tests, or those are options that are there. The reason why we put them there, honorable member, was that we wanted people to truthfully state the type of test that they had. And when they enter in that they have a rapid antigen test or a rapid antibody test, they instantly get a red. So that is the reason we put that there, because if we felt that the only option that we provided them with was a PCR test, they would all click PCR test. And then when they arrived at the border with something that was different, they would say, oh, well, the only option I had was this PCR test, and therefore I showed up with my antibody test. So we purposely put that in there so that they could truthfully answer, yes, I have an antibody test, and then they would get an instant red. Now, I will admit, to begin with, there were some bumps in the road in terms of the algorithm, but those have now been corrected so that when you put in antigen or antibody test, you're supposed to get an instant red. And those adjustments have been made. So we put those in there on the advice of the Health Directorate. They told us to list those options so that people could truthfully answer what type of test they had, so then we could determine that it's a red if they had anything that was a PCR test. So that is, I just wanted to clarify those for you, good member.
I'm grateful for
The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
I'm grateful for the response. And whilst I mentioned one country that I thought there were still restrictions, I'm delighted that the member for Freetown has now cleared it up. This is where effective engagement in this parliament works, Mr. Speaker. On the second point, whilst I understand the explanation of the minister, I want to tell you it's not working up to yesterday. And I will provide you with specific details of a specific case up to yesterday where it did not work effectively. And many of our tourists who we welcome have been put back on the plane and returned to their home, Mr. Speaker. So I'm grateful for the explanation. I'll share the personal information, not to the public, but to the minister directly. Thank you. member for Freetown listen.
So I thank I thank the member for Exuma for pointing out some of the deficiencies in the system. I'll just say we're day 7 in this. It's a brand new program. So I will admit there are some bumps in the road. We are very much aware of the issue that you talk about, and corrections are being made to as soon as you answer rapid antigen or rapid antibody, you get an instant red. So that matter will be corrected. But thank you so much for bringing it to our attention.
Grateful.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes the member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Before I make my brief contribution to this resolution, I want to begin on a matter where we ended prior to the lunch hour. You know, there. Beg your pardon? You met a 70-year-old man? That's another issue. That's another issue.
Chair recognizes the member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I want to go back to that matter because the good member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador chose to use that incident with that client to suggest that there is a lack of caring or a lack of compassion on the part of the government. And I'm happy because, you know, sometimes it is said that what is meant for evil turns out. So by raising that issue, I was able to check on the instructions that were given from when I first spoke with the gentleman Monday morning. And I'm able to report to this Parliament that the only reason the good gentleman didn't get the assistance on Monday was because he refused to carry out the instructions, which were to go to the center. I'm pleased to report that Monday evening, after the center didn't hear from him, persons from the Urban Renewal Center went to the good gentleman's house at 7:30 p.m., where he was not at home. Yesterday morning, at 7:50 or thereabout a.m., those persons returned to his home, where he was assisted with 1, a care package, and 2, a food coupon. And so if that, Mr. Speaker, is not evidence of caring and compassion, then I don't know what is. Mr. Speaker, similar to the observation made with the member from Freetown as it relates to our processes with our visitors, there will be bumps in the road. There will be bumps in the road because we are trying some new things. We are attempting in the Department of Social Services to add efficiency and effectiveness and speed to the service that we provide. And so there will be bumps in the road. I've advised that we are beta testing. We are beta testing $735,000 worth of service to our clients right now as I speak. And so there will be some bumps in the road. But those bumps aren't because we don't care. Those bumps are because we're trying to change some things, and there is resistance to change. You keep hearing the other side saying, people don't want to go online. But the truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, this is the very thing that will give them the speed that they're asking for. Now, we are aware that there are some persons who just won't be able to do or won't be able to do it now. And so we're providing assistance for those persons. We're providing Wi-Fi services at all of the urban renewal centers. Persons from the urban renewal centers make up part of our IT team. And so persons will be able to go there who don't have the device. We're also putting in place individuals who will act as host or hostess for persons who do show up to a social services center, and they can be assisted by being told, you don't really have to be on the line, you know. Show me your phone. Go there, touch this, touch that. You already in. And so until we get to where we're trying to get, which will never be a destination, because the change and the transformation that we have in mind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is a journey. I say to my team, we subscribe to the philosophy of total quality management, where we'll never be satisfied that it's done. We're hoping that we can continue to do it faster, and when we can't find a way to do it faster, we look for a way to do it better. And when we find a way to do it better, we'll go back to faster and better and faster and better. That is the transformation that we are about. That is a journey and not a destination. Mr. Speaker, while some may choose to run away from their record, I stand on our record. I stand on my record as the minister. As would have been said here by Exuma and Ragged Island, if a situation is pointed out, it is addressed as best as we can. Yeah. And so, for those who have a genuine concern, yes, for those who have a genuine concern, I give my sincere assurance that once it is brought to our attention, like we did with Exuma, like we've done for other persons who I will allow to remain anonymous since they didn't identify themselves, only because you identified yourself. Like we continue to do, we will be responsive, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've heard the contributions thus far. I've heard the suggestion that the Bahamian people have cooperated and don't need to be coerced. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I sat right here when the good member for Kalani invited the Bahamian people to form part of his citizens' army. And so I knew from day one that this was all voluntary. That army also knew that by enlisting, they were prepared to make some sacrifices. And it is those sacrifices that has gotten us to where we are today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I heard the good member for Elizabeth, the former Minister of Health, who gave the comparative analysis to the amount of testing per million, et cetera, et cetera. There's also another comparative analysis, the amount of cases that resulted per million, per whatever. And so while we have not tested as many of those other countries, we also have not gotten as many as some of them got either. And that again is because of the citizen army that the good member for Kalani enlisted, that came on voluntarily and are continuing to be willing to make the sacrifices. Mr. Speaker, we all are accustomed to our everyday freedoms. And when we hear put some restrictions on those freedoms, it is also understood that we put those very same restrictions on ourselves. And so it's not as if there is a suggestion that you can't do what this one could do. And so we too are making those sacrifices, Mr. Speaker. And so I express my gratitude to all who enlisted in the Citizens Army. I express my gratitude to all who played a role, all who played a role in the the front line, police officers, defense force officers, prison officers, immigration officers, medical practitioners, regular citizens, church folk, of course, that great army from the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. We all have this personal responsibility. This personal responsibility, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not just to ourselves, but for those frontline workers who sacrificed when there was even greater uncertainty, when they put themselves on the line and asked us to stay home and hide, they stood out there. They put themselves in harm's way. They made a considerable sacrifice. And even the naysayers, either by accident, mention and acknowledge some of the gains that we've made. Those gains, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will be in vain if we do not keep alert, if we do not keep our hand on the tiller, to use the sailing analogy. No time to tap. There's no time to tap. No time to jive. Tighten the main sheet because the wind is in our sail. The evidence is there with the numbers. Yes, there are uncertainties. Yes, there are uncertainties, Mr. Speaker. But I'll tell you what is certain. I'll tell you what is certain, Mr. Speaker. Our numbers on the dashboard is certain. Mr. Speaker, I didn't have the privilege, I don't know if I would have been even smart enough to be involved in the Hippocratic oath that the good member, Hippocratic oath that the good member from Kalani spoke so highly of this morning. And I definitely don't know the Latin word for it, but I grew up around older persons and hearing and being reminded that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I became a police officer at the tender age of 18. And I was given the mandate, prevention and detection of crime, and then apprehension, enforcement of all laws, apprehension of all offenders. And so I know and appreciate, they're saying I'm speaking too loud. Oh, I know and appreciate the value of prevention. Now, one of the difficulties about prevention is it's difficult to be measured. Because if you save 5 persons or you prevent 5 persons from dying, that's kind of difficult to measure because it's all hypothetical. But if you do the comparative analysis, if you remind yourself, as is usually said, when our neighbors to the north sneeze, we catch a cold. Mr. Deputy Speaker, you'll have to accept that so far, what we've been doing have prevented us from catching that cold. And one thing is certain about our neighbors in the north. Anytime you want to know how serious a matter is, you wait to hear them call out the National Guard. The National Guard has been called out, is active with our neighbors in the north. So it's serious. Yet still, the methods that we've employed, the strategies that we have employed, has us where we are. Have we been perfect at it? No. Have we made some mistakes? Yes. But our intention is good. Our adherence to the advice from the experts is good. Our execution so far is good. And so we invite persons who really want to be a part of this army, who have the suggestions and the expertise and the willingness. We are open for suggestion. We are open for recommendation, but not for grandstanding. Not for grandstanding, not for persons who will seize an opportunity of a mishap to try and show what is negative. Mr. Speaker, our intention is a positive one. Our focus is a positive one. And that is where we will remain positively focused. Mr. Speaker, as I thank the citizens' army that has gotten us where we are, I want to say a special thanks to those members in the Southern Shores constituency. They have done well, Mr. Speaker. They have been busy making masks for each other. They have been busy adhering to all the rules and regulations, Mr. Speaker. They have been busy looking after each other. They have been quietly receiving the assistance that is given, and they have been patiently waiting. Southern Shores, my commitment to you has not diminished one iota. I remain on this wall, and like Exuma did, I ask you to continue to adhere to the rules. I ask you to continue to wear your mask. I ask you to continue to physically distance where you can. I ask you, Southern Shores, to accept and acknowledge your personal responsibility in this. This is truly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one for all and all for one. One for all and all for one. Put on your mask to protect others from you and to protect you from others. As we celebrate our 47th anniversary of independence, please know that the continuation of these emergency orders are not intended to take away from your independence. As a matter of fact, even while the emergency orders were in place, we saw a continued relaxing of the restrictions. And so for those who would suggest that this is some love of power, that this is some attempt to cast aside democracy, that couldn't be further from the truth. But the evidence that is irrefutable, even by the naysayers, is that we can honestly and truly say that we have handled this sufficiently well that we find ourselves in a good place. I believe, Mr. Speaker, it's Proverbs 16:7 that says, when a man's ways please God, even his enemies are at peace with him. Mr. Speaker, it is our very own former Attorney General, who is no friend necessarily of this government, who was able to testify to the way this pandemic was handled by this government. And so, Mr. Speaker, no, it's not about any personal wish for power. It is ensuring that the Bahamian people continue to be as safe as we can possibly keep them, in keeping with our mandate as a government. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, Southern Shores is pleased to support this resolution.
Thank you, member for Southern Shores. As many. Chair recognizes the member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to rise here again in this House on behalf of the good people of St. Anne's. Mr. Deputy, the I'd just try to do a couple random points. We are here today to debate a resolution for a new proclamation, because the old proclamation ceased. That's the only reason we're here today. Otherwise, we would have last week extended the proclamation. So this is a technical issue. It was not intended for the proclamation to lapse. So therefore, I think any sinister view imputed in that really is not there. It was a procedural error at the late night hour of the budget closing that a resolution was not tabled, and the law is very clear. I think that put that one issue. So we've come to debate it's not extending the other 6 months. It's just that issue. The Emergency Powers Act and secondly, the Emergency Powers Act and the Constitution are very clear. Where there is a state of emergency, A, B, and C follows. When the drafters of the Constitution were in London in 1972, that was some 40 or 30 something years after the last war. There was no real threat of another war or contemplation of another war. So when the Emergency Powers Act and the Constitution are drafted the way they are, it is obviously, and if you read for the supervision of mutiny, rebellion, etc., which is not the case, and maintaining of supplies and services essential to life and the well-being of the community. That is what this order is based on. It is not time limited. So let's not waste our time by threatening to go to court to decide on this. We have, as the Prime Minister, as the member for Killarney very rightly said this morning, a pandemic on our hands. So therefore, you need ways of dealing with the pandemic. I think we should accept that. That's very basic on the... Now, you read this morning's paper, and I am quoted as saying we need an explanation as to what happened on Monday night. That becomes, as the member for Elizabeth said, that's the love and disagreements we may have across the floor. I'm fully of the belief, and will stand by the member for Killarney and his government, that the emergency powers should be extended, because there has to be a need in the case of an emergency to be able to react quickly and not to call the House back and get unanimous consent and all of that. The competent authority needs to be able to move quickly to prevent the spread. That I think is acceptable. Where I have a slight difficulty is possibly we need to look at some things a little bit differently. So we adopted the tourism plan of gradual opening of the economy. Yes, we shut down. And the great thing about the Bahamas is we're surrounded by water. That's so simple. So the state of Florida, people can drive from Tallahassee to Fort Lauderdale to go to the beach. So that backdrop they have, and Texas and wherever, is millions of people that can drive to a beach. We don't have that problem. We have 300,000 people, 400,000 people. And what, maybe Freetown will tell us, up till this morning, we probably had 2,000 people come in since the opening of the airport. Not that many. But we advertised ourselves as a safe environment, to say it is perfectly safe to come to the Bahamas and have a holiday, therefore enticing people to come to our shores. And then we turn around and say the beaches in Nassau are not safe. That's a PR a public relations nightmare for me. So the question remains is, have people canceled at the Ocean Club? Are they going home? Are we going to send a negative public relations message back? These are issues that are on my mind. The other issue, which is interesting, is the order that was signed this morning, on table this morning, is that all public beaches are open. That's why I raised the question for the explanation. So as far as the member for Killarney this morning expressed to us why there should be emergency orders. We talked about the blood and all this, which I don't understand. everything will go kapunk because of this COVID, which is fair enough. That didn't just come about on Monday. That's been here before. It's always been here as part of the COVID. So that seems straightforward. And I understand that the medical person said may have said, and I did not hear it, so I can be confirmed whether it's right or wrong, there is no current threat of community spread. So if I'm wrong on that, someone can correct me. So I'm a little at nerve's edge as why the virus will not find the beach on Eleuthera or the beach on Acklands, but it'll find the beach in Grand Bahama and Nassau. No, because you banned it in Nassau. You haven't banned it on anywhere else. So, hang on, just fine, you all have all the answers. That's why you're over there. And I have the right to speak over here. I am free.
You've been going long now. You've been going long.
Free. Ain't coming back. Free. So, tomorrow, a pile of people, if I can use that word, are going to jump on a plane and go to a number of our family islands and go to the beach. And they're going to come back to Nassau on Sunday because those beaches are open. I drive in from the west every day and I go past several beaches. I made a point this week of going by several beaches. And it has been glorious to see the children and the adults swimming on the beach. And matter of fact, some of us older people like to go in salt water because it helps a number of ailments and everything else. So from Monday to Friday, from the 1st of July till 5 or 9 or 10 o'clock on Thursday night, it's perfectly okay to go in the beach. But at 10 o'clock, when I was young, I used to go on the beach at 10 o'clock at night too. But and I'm sure we all did. When we were a lot younger. When we were a lot younger. So now, so that's why I questioned this morning, I questioned in the newspaper article, I am not comfortable that we have a full enough explanation as to why the beaches on those islands are closed for that weekend. And I will add my conjecture to it right now. The order is dated this morning. Obviously, the AG's office had to draw it up. The 2 cases in Grand Bahama, as we heard from someone, we're not sure whether they're imported cases or local cases. So we can't opine on that, but they're not cases in Nassau. So we've opened the construction industry, we've opened the various industries. And I agree with the member for Georgetown, Exuma. I think we need to look at that 8 o'clock closure of restaurants, of the kitchen, to allow for 2 sittings. It's the summer, it's later evenings. I think we could probably push that back a little bit because you have to have to get into a restaurant, you're probably looking at 6:37 to have a comfortable meal before that kitchen closes. But you don't have to be home until 10 o'clock. Now, I know that's to allow staff and everything, but they could be made essential services. So you could stretch that to 9 or possibly later so that the tourist industry, when a tourist comes here, and I'm not favoring the tourists, they're going to come here, they're going to go, on Thursday, they're going to go to the beach, they're going to go home, have a shower, get ready for dinner. The casino's closed, the rake and scrape, everything. They'd want to go out for a nice, relaxing dinner, and they're rushed out because they've got to be there by 7 o'clock later. So I urge the government to take a look at that because we've been progressively opening the country and no increases in COVID. Yeah.
Chair recognizes the member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, originally the lockdown, Deputy Speaker, my apologies. The original lockdown, the evening was 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock. You recognize that a lot of people may not necessarily complete their meal until 8:39, the average person, or 9:30. And therefore, it was subsequently moved to 10, accommodating that. You also recognize that there may be instances where people may not necessarily complete their meal until 9:45 or whatever. But there are provisions where the manager of such restaurant can just call 311 or the commissioner, informing that there are still individuals in the restaurant and they can move. I'm giving you the fact.
Thank you. I'd like to say thanks to the member of Kalani. But you see, one thing with due respect, a restaurant has to run on a certain number of people. Now, both the member of Killarney and I have been chairman of the Hotel Corporation in different times. And so we know full well a hotel, I'll just use this as an example, needs a certain number of rooms to break even. You need to, so what you do in a number of the hotels, you'd sell a number of cheaper rooms till you got to, when we used to run that was then our hotel out there, certain number of rooms until you got to the break-even point. Then you started changing the rate around until you made profit off that. A restaurant has the same issue. So a restaurant has the physical distance. So if you go to any restaurant, you're seeing there's half the amount of tables. They still have the overheads in cases where people don't rent them. They have to then get the staff in, cook the meal. And most restaurants are under the impression they have to close their kitchen at 8 o'clock. That is what they are under the impression. So you ring a restaurant and try and make a reservation, they will not take a reservation after 8 o'clock. So I think that's something, I think that's what the member for Exuma was trying to put across. Whilst if you could get served at 8:30, you could still be home by 10 o'clock. And the staff could still be home by 10, which would allow 2 sittings or 3 sittings at that restaurant. Because half of all of this is making sure we make a profit. I know we don't like that bad word, but unless people are making a profit, we are not going to hire more people, we are not going to open up the economy, and we're not going to get people off the national insurance board. And I think that is important. So for instance, I see on July 9th, I think that's tomorrow, Nobu will be opening up at Atlantis. Atlantis is not open, but you can go and make a reservation at Nobu to go and have dinner. Well, obviously that was a place that was used to serving until late hours of the night because of the casinos and so on. So I would look at that. I still think, and I'll come back to this, that we need a better explanation of why these beaches on these particular islands were closed. Now, the member for Southern Shores showed his fantastic sailing ability by saying you got to tighten it down. I forget what you said. Tighten it down, hold on to the tiller, keep the hand on the tiller, keep the hand. Oh, but let me finish the story for you. To get to the finish line, you have to tack and jibe. Otherwise, you never get to the finish line. You have to round the mark and go downwind to the finish line. No, you can't keep bucking the wind. You have to tack and go downwind to get to the finish line. So we'll always remember that. So at some point, we have to tack, jibe, and get downwind to the finish line. The finish line is never upwind. So I'm glad you said it's all about timing. And that's what you were trying to do with the gradual opening of the economy, is that question of timing. So I see this current rule regulation as the wind shifted direction quickly, and you made an adjustment in the hand on the tiller. Having said that, I think we need to make sure that we correct the course properly and get back on course. I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I don't take any, I'm going to quote something I've said in this house before. There is such a thing called the broken glass syndrome. And for many people who know that, that's when you see an abandoned house, it's perfectly all right. Then one day you go past and someone's thrown a rock through the window. And then we all know the rest of the story. I then parallel with that we have many members of the Citizens Army. But in any army, you have to court-martial a few. And are we scared to court-martial a few and let the majority of the army suffer? There is no doubt the majority of the citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas have been following the regulations under this code. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are. They have been good citizens, and they've had a good general in charge in terms of the member for Killarney. No, we accept that. But we cannot allow a few bad apples to continue to cause damage in our community. The other day we passed here, this is where I have some problems with the way we govern in our country, both political parties. We passed the cell phone law. You weren't supposed to use this in the car. How many people have you seen? We haven't enforced it. And that is one of our fundamental problems in our country today. We've got police on every corner coming up Bay Street, 4 and 5 on every corner. There's no shops open, they're closed. You know, we've gone and put red lines in banks where you shouldn't go across this area. So are we saying we cannot police the beaches? Is that what we're really saying? I hope not. But we've got some bad boys. We saw videos of the Prime Minister said of someone out this way and restaurants to the east and west of his. Then the issue is bring those people before the court martial. Deal with them because they are what's ruining it for the majority of us that are law-abiding citizens. So I can have a dinner party on Thursday night in my house, Friday night at my house, and have 20 people. That's what the regulations say. I can go to church. I can go to a beach in Eleuthera with 5 people. But I can't go to a beach in Grand Bahama and Nassau and anywhere else. It doesn't fit in the mosaic of what we are trying to achieve. And that's why I raised the issue this morning, not out of being disrespectful or anything else. We have to be consistent with this. So we need, if the member for Freetown hasn't already done it in his public relations exercise, to start to say, well, it's too late now because you booked your ticket, but if we're going to do this again, there will be restrictions on such and such a day. Because the tourists know they need a COVID test. So that's been publicized. So that's not an issue. But when they come to these beaches expecting to get away from whatever and not be able to go to them. And also, if they take the length of the beaches, you could spread people out from ever and never get beyond 5 people. So I just raised that issue as the reason behind why I question why the latest order that was stated this morning has actually been done. Because COVID, if it is such a disease that will affect your heart, your liver, your eyes, and whatever we heard this morning, it doesn't stop working at 10 o'clock. It doesn't all of a sudden go to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it doesn't necessarily not work on a beach in Eleuthera as works on a beach in Nassau. It doesn't, in my humble opinion, add up unless there's some underlying reason that we haven't heard. But exactly, remember, you've got no case in the Outer Islands, but because you've got cases in Nassau and Grand Bahama, and until this morning, or until yesterday morning, you didn't have any cases in Grand Bahama, and you still don't have any cases in Nassau, there must be some underlying issue that we don't understand. Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, it is my pleasure to stand today to support the continuation of the emergency powers as a necessary tool in the Army to fight the COVID disease, because we cannot rely on normal rules and regulations in a time of pandemic, because the government cannot react quickly enough without these laws in place. I just trust that as we go forward, there are less wind shifts as we go towards the finish line. Thank you very much.
As many. The chair recognizes the member for Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honor to say a few words on this debate and to wrap up the debate. One of the wonderful things, Mr. Deputy, let me begin, Mr. Deputy, by wishing you, your family, all parliamentarians, and Bahamians everywhere blessed independence. I have my
Bring that here.
my sugar. The Prime Minister spoke earlier today, and he used the word some words from our national anthem. See how the world marks the manner of your bearing. And I believe in this debate where everyone in our parliament has had the opportunity to speak. We've been able to show what a free, democratic society is all about. We all have the right to share our views. I'm going to share mine for a few minutes. But before I do that, sir, one of the things I realized in this whole lockup, one of the things that really, really hit me significantly is when you're locked up, the significance and importance of family. It's so important. And so I promised myself, I promised my daughter that she's watching me, that every time I speak now, I will try to start by saying, hi, Danielle. I'm going to try. She's watching me, and she wants to get her healed. So, Danielle. Mr. Speaker, I've had the honor to participate in many, many debates. Many. This one, I believe, is the most consequential, most critical, and most meaningful, even though it's not long. This is a debate about the heart, soul, and the future of our country. And so when my colleague said that he wanted to speak honestly about how he feels, I agree with him. I agree with him. We all have to do that. And that's what I intend to do. Speaker, in mid-March of this year, we closed our borders to protect the Bahamian people. And then we imposed a curfew. I want to thank Prime Minister for that sage response that he had at that time to what was an unprecedented and remains an unprecedented threat. Now, at that time, Mr. Speaker, let's go back just 3 months to March. The same World Health Organization now that's telling us to wear masks, was telling us we don't have to wear masks. The same WHO now that's speaking about travel was saying something entirely different about travel. The same WHO that's telling us something different now was telling us something different about how this virus is spread. Just going back 3 months. The world has been spun on its head. And everything that was 2-3 months ago is different now. And our Prime Minister had the vision to say, let's take a minute. Let's impose a curfew. Let's have a break for the Bahamian people. Let's close our borders. Let's protect our people. Prime Minister, I want to thank you, sir. First, for being proactive. I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for understanding the importance of an early lockdown. He spared the Bahamian people from the overwhelming fear that residents face in other jurisdictions. Let's look at the statistics today. In the United States, 133,000 deaths. Abaco, zero. Brazil, 66,000 deaths. Auckland's, zero. India, 20,000 deaths. Berry Islands, zero. Mexico, 32,000 deaths. Cat Island, zero. United Kingdom, 44,000 deaths, Mr. Speaker. 44,000. Crooked Island, Macau, zero. Italy, 34,000 deaths. Illustra, a big duck egg, 0. Prime Minister, thank you for being proactive. Mr. Deputy, I want to thank the Prime Minister, secondly, for being responsible. He refused to listen to the irresponsible voices, Mr. Speaker. Let's remember what those voices said. Now I got my newspapers this time if anybody wants to stand up. Speaker, I heard voices on national newspapers that called for us within 1 week to open the liquor stores. Open the liquor stores. But you know, Mr. Speaker, our Prime Minister was responsible. He understood that if you open the liquor stores, you open a door to irresponsible behavior. And he was steadfast. And he looked those irresponsible voices in the eye right across the table and he said, no. So, Mr. Speaker, look at the results over the last 3 months. In New York, as of today, they have 32,000 deaths. In Exuma, 0. In New Jersey, they have 15,000 deaths. In Inagua, 0. In Massachusetts, they have 8,000 deaths, COVID deaths. Long Island, 0. In Illinois, they have over 7,000 COVID deaths. In Mayaguana, 0. Pennsylvania, over 6,000 COVID deaths. Ragged Island, 0. In California, they have over 6,000 deaths of COVID.
All that we going on the Ragged Island.
In Rumpke, 0. Speaker, in Michigan, they have over 6,000 COVID deaths.
Yeah.
And in San Salvador, they have 0. Prime Minister, thank you for saving the Bahamian people. You know, Mr. Deputy,
Drink on that.
the steadfast approach of the Prime Minister and this government is to be contrasted with what I call the wishy-washy, hot and cold response of the opposition. You know, Mr. Speaker, I was so shocked today when I heard the leader of the opposition say that they supported the emergency order. And I'm looking at a newspaper dated the Tribune, March 20th, right in the order. Says PLP leader Philip Brave Davis criticized an emergency order issued by Prime Minister Hubert Minnis, saying the provisions appeared to be rushed. He said the prohibitions outlined in the order, and I'm adopting it, included a national curfew and the suspension of business operations with few exceptions that may adversely impact the public. Speaker, these are the people who want to govern this country. These are the people who could not stand up and say, listen, the Prime Minister did what is right by imposing a curfew. He did what is right by suspending business. He was visionary in doing it. And we as an opposition supported to save the lives of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, you get the same kind of wishy-washy, on the fence response that we got in the debates today.
Speaker, documents you're going to table. So you can table
this is a
together.
Tribune from the 20th of March 2020.
Order
I
of
have
document.
several of them.
We'll do that then.
I have several of them.
No point, what is there?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be short, like I said. Thirdly, I want to thank the Prime Minister for being caring. And as I indicated, when some were making headlines saying, open the liquor stores, open the liquor stores. That's a good picture of you, Cat Island.
He said, too much pressure, he needs a drink.
Can you reference the?
This is the Nassau Guardian, Speaker, March 30. Just a couple days after the criticizing the emergency order.
You can hear it straight, mouth.
The people, Mr. Speaker, who want to govern this country, who cannot credibly tell the Bahamian people, we stood up for you. We were responsible. We stood with the Prime Minister when he made the tough decisions. And it must have been lonely for him to make tough decisions and stand up and go against the grain and say these things early on. But you see, Mr. Speaker, I've given the figures. 0 straight across the board with every island except 3 islands in this country. That's a result of the Prime Minister being steadfast and responsible. That's a caring government. He relied on the medical advice. He relied on the medical advice. He consulted the doctors and the experts. You know, there were some people who were asking for the beaches to be open early. We come back to this beach issue again. But let's remember, we were there earlier before. Mr. Speaker, we have the specter of what was happening in the United States. In Florida, when they had spring break, it was a nightmare. They partied and they partied, a lot of young people. And then they went back to their homes all over the world and took COVID with them. The Prime Minister saw that. We just saw in Michigan what happened last week. And all of us saw it on television. You know, on the 29th of April, we had people in Exuma charged. Police charged 13 after beach party. Police charged 13 people in Exuma with breaking the government's 24-hour curfew. I'm just saying, I'm speaking about the charge, yes. You are the one, Exuma, who was speaking about all my matters before the court, and now you're talking about this one before the court?
Not particularly.
That's
Mr. Speaker,
let me have what the point is. What the point of order?
I won't give Carmichael legal advice. But good counsel is that when matters are before the court, that we don't discuss them here, Mr. Deputy.
Exumas, I think the member for Carmichael merely, I don't get really reaches the bar of Judas.
He hasn't done it yet.
Well, Exumas in the Rocket Island. Please, so are you questioning my competence then? All right then. Let me do my job. Thank you, Exuma.
In the chair,
Thank you,
Mr. Deputy.
But carry on, Exuma. I'm sorry, carry on, Carmichael.
Speaker, there are 2 things, you know. I did that for a reason, Mr. Speaker. You know, there was a time when every time that Exuma came in here, he used to mention my case. Every time. I wanted him to see what the shoe was on the other foot. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to go into the merits of the case.
I'm sure you know.
I'm just giving the facts of the charge, okay? And plus, Mr. Speaker, my daughter's watching.
All of our daughters are watching, so I hope we all behave ourselves.
But you know, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, you know, Speaker, I want you to know this. 2 of them are over there, my friends. They're a lot richer than me, but they are my friends. And I stick close to them because I try to learn from them how to make money. So, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you the hypocrisy. And let me tell you why this Prime Minister is so exceptional. This was Wednesday, 29th of April. 29th of April. On May 18th, a little over 2 weeks later, PM criticizes for keeping Exuma Elutra closed. That's Exuma. That's Exuma. That is Exuma. Speaker,
Can you quote the reference again, please?
this is the Guardian of 18th of April.
What's your point of order, Exuma?
Mr. Speaker, the member for Carmichael is drawing a connection between comments I make and a matter that's before the court. And there's absolutely no connection between the points I made and the matter that's before the court. Mr. Speaker, if we are going to discuss this effectively, we will be breaking rules here. I've cautioned the member for Carmichael before. Look at the QC. Look at the QC. And he knows better, Mr. Deputy. And I ask you, Mr. Deputy, I ask your assistance in this matter.
A member for Carmichael, the last article that you're referring to, I know you merely said one or two words on it, but
Mr. Deputy, I was merely pointing out what. Absolutely. Within 2 weeks of something happened, something else happening. That's all. And everybody else out there can draw their inferences. So, without saying anything else, the Speaker, the Deputy, I just want to show what the member for Exuma was saying a few months ago.
Bring it on.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to read the article. I'm just going to table it so that anyone who's interested in seeing what it says can take a look at it and see what that member was saying at that time. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, the advice that was given for free to our Prime Minister was advice, thank you, Prime Minister, for not taking. Thank you for not following that advice. You know, Mr. Speaker, I want to, since the member for Exuma thought that I was not being fair to him, I want to thank him. I want to thank you, Exuma. I want to thank you publicly. Because today when you spoke, you made the case for why we need this order. You said two things. And the two things you said show how successful we have been with the regime that the Prime Minister has put in place. The first thing you said is that you are informed that no COVID patient is currently hospitalized. That is a wonderful thing in our country. We don't have a single COVID patient who's hospitalized. Prime Minister, thank you. Bahamian people, thank you. There's nobody from Angliston on ventilators in the hospital. Nobody from Freetown in the hospital on ventilators. Nobody from South Beach in the hospital on ventilators. Nobody from Carmichael. Nobody from Garden Hills. Nobody from any of these constituencies in New Providence and our family islands in the hospitals on ventilators. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for being stubborn, obstinate, and getting the job done. Thank you very much. Exuma, the second thing you said today, and I want to thank you for saying, is there have been no deaths in our country from COVID for months. For months, What would have happened if we opened the liquor stores? What would have happened if we just opened the beaches and the young people who were asymptomatic went back home to their parents and grandparents? Prime Minister, on behalf of the people of Carmichael, I thank you for the fact that we do not have any deaths in quite some time in this country from COVID. Thank you, Prime Minister. Contrast that with just today in Miami, 2,900 new cases. Just today. Speaker, as I get ready to wrap up, Mr. Speaker, I told you I wouldn't be long. Members opposite hinted at constitutional challenges. You know, Mr. Speaker, if you challenge the Constitution, that's how the law is clarified. You go to court and you challenge it. Now, if anybody out there, and you have a QC, you have a top lawyer in this country over there, if any of them believed in what they were saying, they would have already been to the courts. I don't see any of them rushing to the courts, Mr. Speaker. None of them. So either they don't believe what they're saying or they don't have the strength of their conviction. Smoke and mirror. What I'm going to say, Mr. Speaker, though, is despite all that they said today, not one of them proposed any solutions except to say, amend the Employment Act. Just look carefully at what they said. They're not ready for prime time. They're not ready to leave this country, Mr. Speaker. Or you want to amend the Public Health Act too. Thanks. Speaker, I have to ask you to protect me from Exuma harassing me. Mr. Speaker, the final point I want to thank the Prime Minister for is his inspirational leadership. Say, Mr. Speaker, because of the Prime Minister, bear with me, Mr. Speaker. Just when I sorry. Carol, I thought you were my friend. Anyway, I can't find what I was looking for. The Speaker, somebody must have taken my mask. I don't know what happened to them. But because of the inspirational leadership of the Prime Minister, we were able to distribute 1,500 safe in Carmichael masks in Carmichael. And I see people wearing them all the time. And we were also able to distribute in Carmichael another 1,500 proud Carmichael mom masks in Carmichael. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, we were able to distribute another 5,000 masks so far in Carmichael. So we've given out a little over 8,000, another 8,000 masks. We've given out over 11,000 masks in Carmichael so far. That is as a result of the inspiration of our Prime Minister, who was led by example. So thank you, Prime Minister, for being an inspirational leader. Speaker, I'm closing by saying this. The challenge that we have to face has never been faced before in history. Never. We have, this government has faced it head on. We've sought to do our best to protect the Bahamian people. Prime Minister announced a national reopening plan. And he was commended for that plan. He was commended internationally. Yeah. I have with me one of those commendations, which is the Jamaica Observer. Yeah. And Jamaica said that they wanted to be like us. Yeah. And they quoted our Prime Minister speaking of acting with prudence, acting with good judgment, balancing health as well as the economic and social needs of the country. And that's what we have done as a government. I want to thank my colleagues, my Prime Minister and my colleagues, for understanding what the opposition doesn't understand. And that is that leaders must lead. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for leading. Thank you for not waffling. Thank you for not sitting on the wall. Thank you for putting the safety of our people first. Thank you for being an example to the world. Speaker, I support the resolution.
Order that the documents brought up.
Let me just-
Tabling some documents first.
Thank you.
Order that the documents be brought up.
There's the 8th. Thank you very much.
Order the documents to lie on the table. Members, it's being moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community to continue in force. The proclamation, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulation 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approve the continuance of the proclamation made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. B, affirm the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulation 2020 made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. C, affirm the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020 made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. And D, affirm the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 31st day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. The resolution is agreed. I don't think Exuma really means that. Member statements. The chair recognizes the member for North Abaco.
Mr. Deputy, I thank you. And I just want to extend condolences to the family of Mavis Russell of Crown Haven, whom we lost this morning. And to say to the family that our prayers are with them. I tried calling Cliff Russell a little earlier. Wasn't able to reach him, but surely I'll see him on the weekend. Also want to say to my constituents that we have planned independence breakfasts for you in Central Abaco, in Treasure Key, and in Little Abaco. I got to still reach Rusi down in Grand Key, and Giselle or one of them over in Greentail Key. I also will be attending the ecumenical service on Sunday, where we celebrate our 47th year of independence. I believe I'm going to go fishing on the rock again in Little Abaco with Cliff Russell on the weekend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the member for South Beach.
Thank you. I wish just to extend a very blessed anniversary of a natal day to Mrs. Jocelyn Flowers. South Beach, who is today, this day, 79 years young.
Thank you, member for South Beach. As many, Chair recognizes member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I rise on behalf of the good, the strong, and the resilient people of the Golden Gates constituency. And Mr. Deputy, I just have 2 condolences. But before going to the condolences, sir, I just want to mention a matter pertaining to a constituent. Mr. Deputy, we are all very much aware of the question that is posed down here on Bay Street on the Junkanoo, Christmas, Boxing Day, New Year's. And the question we hear from all the groups when they come down here, it was started by one group in particular, but we all know it now, is who are we? Who are we? Ah, well. Well, for the record, I'm a Saxon.
Good man.
But on a serious note, Mr. Speaker, it came to my attention a couple of weeks ago that one of my constituents, a young lady, she was the valedictorian at her school, Nassau Christian Academy. Her name is Antonia Ferguson. Yes, Ferguson. She was interviewed by our news, and she indicated that she intended, Minister of Education, to study marine biology. A wonderful field, and the minister can attest that it's a field that we do not have too many Bahamians in. And we need more marine biologists. By far, we need a lot more. And then she went on to say that she wished she were a mermaid. And Mr. Deputy, you would not believe it. The vile and the scoffing that was done to that young lady because she made that statement. Someone put out on Facebook something that was very unkind to her because she made that statement. But what they did not appreciate was that that statement spoke to her excitement and enthusiasm for marine biology. And that is what we want of all of our youngsters, all of them, especially those excelling. And that's why I asked the question, who are we? Who are we? We go on Facebook and we make fun of people like Antonia Ferguson. And that is wrong. That is wrong. This is a young lady who's done extremely well. She's a valedictorian. She's looking forward to a bright future. She's looking forward to make a contribution to her country where it is most needed. Minister of Education just told us that. But no, she was made fun of in the worst way possible. And you know what? It went viral. It went viral. And you know how I came to know about this Deputy? Her mother and her father, her parents, were so hurt that they contacted me about it as their member of parliament. That is sad. But that's where we are in this country. We have young people achieving great things, right, Minister of Youth? We have young people achieving great things. But it was more important to scoff and make fun of the young lady. And that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. And it's sad to know that that's where we are. And what is it we would not do for a like? And what is it we would not do for a comment? What is it we would not do for a share? That's sad. It is sad that that's where we are as a people. And particularly as we approach our independence. And so, to Antonia, to your parents, your family, your relatives, you have done well. And we look forward to great things from you. And I ask all of the members of this House to please join me in giving a thunderous applause for Antonia.
Thank you, member.
Thank you. It's just a bit as an aside on that. I would just say, just as an aside on that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, you know, I would just certainly hope, Mr. Deputy, that that would have happened whether it was a male student or a female student, Mr. Deputy. But I leave that there. And as to the condolences, as I said, just a couple of condolences, Mr. Deputy. Myself and the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rum Keys in Salvador, the Honorable Brave Davis, both of us attended a funeral this past weekend for the wife of Bishop Anthony Roker. His wife, Michelle Rose Roker, passed away. He's a longtime constituent of Golden Gates. And I just want to publicly offer condolences to him and his family. We were at the, as Pikes would say, the tabernacle, the big church on East Street, Church of God of Prophecy. And I just wanted to offer heartfelt condolence to the Roker family. And is that right? All right. And one other family, the Davis family of Golden Gates as well. They lost their mother and they lost their father 2 years ago. And so I want to offer heartfelt condolences to the Davis family of Golden Gate 1. And may God bless them all, keep them all, and may the souls of both Michelle Roker and Miss Davis rest in peace. A perpetual light shine upon them. Thank you.
Obliged. As many. Members, I'd just like to take this opportunity, Member Fallon for Tall Pines, to wish all of my constituents and indeed the Bahamas a happy Independence Weekend. Also, wish to also remind my residents in Tall Pines that we continue our food assistance program. We've given out hundreds and we intend to continue to assist persons of the constituency. Thirdly, I wish to advise Tall Pines residents of our virtual town hall meeting on the 23rd of July. You will have a representative from the Ministry of Social Services, or Department of Social Services, come and speak to us about the benefits and accessing social services benefits. And I'm sure that they will share other benefits from other ministries. And fourthly, the 25th of July, we'll also be hosting a legal aid clinic, a web legal aid clinic. We have several lawyers who will be speaking on family law, employment law, estates, and corporate law if you're interested in starting businesses. The 25th at 1 to 3 p.m. Sorry. Finally, I'd wish to, on behalf of my family and my residents, wish a very hardworking and respected member of the North Andros community, Mr. Charles Ford Miller, our condolences. He passed away but a week and a half ago when he was laid to rest this weekend. Myself and the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands attended that funeral. I wish to give them my condolences. They're close friends and family members of both of us. I also wish to give my condolences to a very, very respected and famous family in the Fox Hill community. I hope I'm not preempting the member for Fox Hill, Ms. Janet Davis, who was very respected by all in the Fox Hill, and I think throughout the Bahamas, the Christ the King family. My condolences to the Davis family and letting them know that our prayers are with them. Members, Bahamas, happy independence. As many, the chair recognizes the member for Baines and Grandstown.
Mr. Deputy, I just briefly wanted to stand as we have heard most of the plea over the past few weeks to young persons who have been noted or deemed to be super spreaders. And so I just wanted to stand to publicly say to a number of young persons I know who follow me and who look up to me, and other young persons out there who listen to my voice in this honorable house, to encourage them, Mr. Speaker, to follow the protocols. We've been hearing lately a lot of young persons who have become super spreaders or who are gathering in large crowds. I want to encourage them to follow the protocols put in place by the public health authorities, and to realize that all of us have a hand to play in this. And if each of us do our part, the sooner, the better we'll be able to get out of this, better than we went into it. So I want to encourage all young persons under the sound of my voice to get in the fight, do your part, social distance, wash your hands, be mindful of the places where you go and the people that you see, and most importantly, wear a mask. And so I send that out there to them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further member statements. Further member statements. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notice for future meetings.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Chair, I rise to renew all notices in the name of the officers.
Member for Bambutown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I rise to renew all notices in the name of the government. And Mr. Deputy, I do move that the House adjourns until Wednesday, the 22nd of July at 10 a.m. Mr. Deputy, I second that.
For the second. Being moved and seconded that the House adjourns to the Wednesday, the 26th of July at 22nd, I'm sorry, 22nd of July, 10 a.m. As many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Final adjournment.
Mr. Deputy, I do now move that the House adjourns until 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 22nd of July, 2020. Second, Mr. Deputy.
Being moved and seconded, the House adjourned to Wednesday, the 22nd of July, 10 a.m. 2020. As many members in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. The House is adjourned until Wednesday, the 22nd of July, 2020 at 10 a.m.